Your agentic pipeline runs fine on Claude Opus 4.6. You swap in Claude Opus 4.7 to get the coding gains, and suddenly you're getting 400 errors on every single API call because temperature is just gone now. Opus 4.7 is the coding first upgrade. Opus 4.6 is the flexible, stable integration, and you need to know which one actually fits your workflow before you migrate. Test 1. Cost. The sticker price is identical on both models. $5 per million input tokens, 25 per million output. But I had to run the numbers twice because the new tokenizer in Opus 4.7 is burning up to 35% more tokens on the exact same input, and that compounds hard across agentic loops. The tool choice overhead numbers are vendor confirmed. Opus 4.7 burns 675 input tokens per tool call. Opus 4.6 burns 497, and that's a 36% gap per call. If your agent is hitting tools dozens of times per task, that overhead stacks into a real cost difference fast, even though the per token rate is identical on both sides. Now, the tokenizer inflation is community reported, so treat the 35% figure as directional rather than exact. But the tool choice overhead is vendor confirmed, and the direction is clear. Same sticker price, more tokens. Consumed on 4.7, which means Opus 4.6 is genuinely cheaper per task for most agentic workloads. I didn't expect the newer model to cost more when the price card is literally identical, but Opus 4.6 takes cost because the tokenizer and tool overhead make 4.7 more expensive in practice. That puts Opus 4.6 up 1-0. I live inside these models every day, so the tokenizer change was the first thing I ran into when I started testing 4.7. Has the overhead already hit your pipelines? Drop it in the comments. Test 2. Coding benchmarks. So the SWE bench verified score is the number most of you are actually here for. If your agent is failing to resolve real GitHub issues, or your tool orchestration pass rate is dragging down a multi-step workflow, this is where the gap between these two models either justifies the migration cost or it doesn't. Across every forward-looking coding eval, Opus 4.7 wins cleanly. 87.6% versus 80.8% on SWE bench verified. 64.3% versus 53.4% on SWE Bench Pro, 70% versus 58% on Cursor Bench, all vendor claimed. The part that stings for 4.7 is the MRCR, long context recall score, where it drops to 59.2% at 256K versus 4.6's 91.9%, which is a blog reported regression, but a directionally alarming one for large repo work. One of the biggest problems I run into when using AI agents is turning their output into YouTube content I can actually use to market my product. That's why this video is sponsored by Subscriber, a tool that helps business owners connect their AI agents to YouTube and market their products without spending 10 hours every week creating content. You can connect Claude or ChatGPT directly to Subscriber. It then analyzes your business, website, and YouTube channel to help you create SEO-optimized video ideas, scripts, thumbnails, and even complete videos that actually match your brand. What I like most is that every week, Subscriber gives me a list of high-potential video ideas I can immediately execute, and it can even help edit videos for me, with or without my face, including videos like the one you're watching right now. It's easy to get started, and you can try Subscriber for free using the link in the description below. Now back to the video. I expected 4.7 to lead on coding, but I didn't expect it to lead by 12 points on Cursor Bench. So Opus 4.7 takes this test on the strength of every forward-looking eval going its way. That ties the series at 1 apiece. Test 3, speed. And 183 seconds versus 242 seconds is the number that should get your attention here. That's Box's measured P50 latency on real agent tasks, and a 59-second difference per task compounds fast when your agent is running dozens of those back-to-back in a single workflow. So which model actually finishes the job faster? Opus 4.7 runs at 55.2 tokens per second, sustained throughput versus 41.3 for Opus 4.6, pres measured by artificial analysis, and Orca Router's blog numbers line up at 89 versus 60 tokens per second. The one area where 4.6 is faster is time to first token, where Orca Router clocked 4.6 at about 19% quicker to first response. So if you're running a chat interface that needs to feel snappy, that matters. Opus 4.7 takes speed because end-to-end agent task time is what actually matters for agentic coding, and 25% faster completion is a real-world win, even though 4.6 beats it on first token latency. That puts Opus 4.7 ahead 2 to 1. 2, 2. Alright, so Opus 4.7 is ahead on coding and speed, but we still have the API flexibility test and the deployment modality test coming up. And the API test is the one that could actually force you to stay on 4.6 no matter what the benchmarks say, because breaking changes in production are a different kind of expensive than a benchmark gap. Test 4. Context and output limits. The objection I kept seeing from teams who already moved to Opus 4.7 is this. You go to set temperature on your existing pipeline, you get a 400 error, and now your whole integration is broken before you've written a single line of new code. That's a vendor-confirmed breaking change, not a hypothetical. Both models share an identical 1 million token context window and 128,000 token max output, so on raw limits, there's nothing to call. But Opus 4.7 drops temperature, top P, and top say entirely, and the legacy thinking mode with enabled plus budget tokens also returns a 400 error, which is a real migration cost for any team that tuned those parameters on 4.6. The raw context and output specs are genuinely identical, so the window size itself is a wash. But the API parameter removal is where the real gap lives, and for teams with existing integrations, it's a forced refactor before you can even run 4.7 in production, not a minor cleanup. I went in thinking this would be a raw numbers comparison, but the API regression is the whole story here. So Opus 4.6 takes context and output limits, because it supports full sampling parameters and both thinking modes without any refactor. That brings the series to 2-all. Test 5, deployment and modality. And 98.5% versus 54.5% is the XBAF visual acuity gap, which is a vendor claim number, but a 44-point difference is hard to explain away. If your agent needs to read a screenshot, parse a UI element, or locate a button on a cluttered interface, that resolution upgrade from 1568 pixels to 2576 pixels long edge changes what the model can actually see. Opus 4.7 takes image input to 2576 pixels on the long edge, which is more than 3 times the pixel area of Opus 4.6's 1568 pixel limit, and ScreenSpot Pro goes from 69% to 79.5% on the strength of that resolution bump alone, blog reported. Both models run on the same 4 cloud platforms, so there's no deployment reach advantage either way. The XBAO methodology isn't publicly documented, so treat the 44-point gap as directional rather than a certified benchmark, and the ScreenSpot Pro improvement is blog reported rather than independently verified. But the resolution specs themselves are vendor confirmed, and the direction across every vision signal points the same way, so the call here is clear. Opus 4.7 wins deployment and modality on vision alone, and that's the deciding test. Claude Opus 4.7 takes it 3 to 2 overall, the better coding agent across the board when your codebase fits in a standard context window. Claude Opus 4.7 wins on coding benchmarks across the board, 70% on Cursor Bench versus 58%, and 12 points ahead on SWE Bench verified at 87.6%. It finishes real agent tasks 25% faster end-to-end, and its vision input is more than 3 times the pixel area of 4.6, which matters a lot for any UI reading or screenshot parsing workflow. Claude Opus 4.6 wins on effective cost per task because the tokenizer and tool choice overhead on 4.7 burn more tokens at the same price. It keeps full API flexibility with temperature, top prop, top call, and both thinking modes intact, and its long context recall at 256K is 91.9% versus 4.7's 59.2%, which is a major gap for large codebase or document analysis work. New agentic coding projects go to Claude Opus 4.7 3 to 2, full stop. But if your codebase is large enough to hit that 256K recall cliff, or your existing pipeline uses temperature and thinking budgets, stay on Claude Opus 4.6 until those regressions are fixed. One thing that doesn't show up in any of the benchmark tables. Opus 4.7's thinking content is omitted by default now, and you have to explicitly pass display:"summarize" to get it back. Teams migrating from 4.6, where thinking output shows by default, will lose visibility into model reasoning silently unless they update every single API call. If you're also watching the Frontier model race, I ran the same kind of breakdown on Fable 5 versus GPT 5.5. And the cost and coding gaps there are a completely different story from what we just saw here, so go check that one out next.